When we are struggling in our relationships, can we truly say that we are healthy? Or if you are physically fit, but you are emotionally struggling or emotionally abusive, can you still say to yourself that you are fit? Emotional health and emotional fitness is a very important part of our overall wellness, because without it, I don't think that we can truly call ourselves healthy. And we are so lucky this month because we have Miss Ray to share her knowledge on how to avoid red flags in relationships. So stay tuned. Hi, Miss Ray. Welcome to the VeggieFit podcast.
Good morning. Happy to be here. Thank you, Camille.
Miss Ray is actually a retired officer. She's like my dad, so that's a profession that's very close to me, and a co-founder of Wow, Women Only Wellness, which will have a gathering somewhere this year in June, right, Miss Ray?
That's right, yes. We're based in the UK, we're based in England, and the gathering is just outside a little village in North Yorkshire. So it's very rural. It's actually on a farm.
Yeah, so very beautiful. Only women are there. And then Miss Ray is passionate about raising awareness of red flag behaviors. So, Miss Ray,
Yeah.
what are the relationship red flags?
Well, I'm coming from the perspective of a new relationship. So I'm talking to teenagers, really. However, it still applies for adults too, because there is a pattern to how abuse manifests.
Mm,
And I would say the biggest is speed. If somebody wants to get serious in a relationship, and I'm talking about partner relationship, I'm not talking about family
mm,
relationships, I'm talking about partners.
mm,
So if somebody wants to go quickly and get serious really quickly, that's a red flag. So you have to be careful to take things easy because you don't want to be committing in any way that keeps you stuck. If that person's abusive, they'll try and get you into some kind of financial agreement. Like there's nobody more loving than a homeless narcissist. They'll want to move into your apartment
mm,
really quickly, or they want you to move in with them really quickly, although they want you to commit to some kind of financial thing or get you pregnant. Or if the abuser is a woman, then they might get pregnant deliberately. Because once you've got a child together,
mm.
regardless of what happens, you're stuck with a relationship in some form with that person. So speed is a really serious one. Also, stalking.
Mm,
When you look at the end of the scale where you see people who are murdered, and mostly it's women who are murdered
mm,
by their abusers, but you can be stalked
mm,
while you're in a relationship. So somebody who wants to know where you are all of the time and then wants you to prove it by sending them photographs, or they want you to come on video when you're out doing your thing, or they pester you constantly with text messages when you're at school or when you're at work, and they demand that you reply to them really quickly. For example, if you're out with your friends and this new person turns up where you are, that's stalking, even though you are in a relationship with them. So you can be stalked before the end of a relationship. When you end an abusive relationship, stalking happens as well. And that person in the UK, 94% of murders that were ex-partner murders, 94% had stalking in that relationship after it had ended, which is really high. So that's a real high risk.
very high.
Yeah, speed and stalking. And also isolation. Like they say things like, oh, I want you all to myself,
Mm,
or, oh, you don't need those people now, you've got me. So isolation is a big thing because they want you to have no support network so they can do what they want. They say things like, oh, I don't think your best friend likes me. And they try to put a wedge between you and your friends and between you and your family. and isolate you and say things that make you kind of second guess. They'll say things like, when I was alone with your best friend, she made a pass at me,
Mm.
and you weren't there, so you don't know that that didn't happen.
That's true.
So, yeah, isolation, speed, and stalking. It's very straightforward.
Mm.
There's a pattern, Camille, there's a pattern to abuse. If you have a room full of women who've been in abusive relationships
Mm.
and they're talking about it, they all say things like, oh my goodness, he used to do that to me.
Mm.
And it's almost like they're married to the same person because the behavior is so common.
Okay. So these red flags, women who have been into this kind of situations, how do these red flags affect them, especially in how they view themselves? Because
Sure, yeah.
especially those women who used to be confident, very intelligent, and all that. And then when they've been into this kind of relationship, it's like they feel that they have lost it all, their confidence, their intelligence, and that trauma that they feel. So, what are the other things that happen to them?
There's a song by a lady called Olivia Rodrigo, and it's called Vampire.
Mm-mm.
If you listen to the words of the song, it's
Yes.
exactly right. It's about how they target you and suck your blood, suck your confidence, leave you dry, like they make you think that you're stupid. And some of the things that women say to me, I feel so stupid. How could I not see that? Those two phrases. And because, and this is the point of the Be Kind, No Excuses process, the point is they come in and it's very under the radar. And people who are going to abuse will also target confident, successful women because their objective seems to be to destroy. And they say things that will chip away at your confidence and your self esteem. For example, somebody might say to you, well, I normally prefer blonde women, but I like you.
Mm.
Now, that is not a compliment. That is to tell you that you are always going to be somebody that he wasn't really attracted to because you're not a blonde. And it's just under the radar, insidious chipping away at your self esteem, saying things like, you're lucky to have me. So, for example, myself, I was a single mum for a long time. I have 3 fantastic children. And somebody once said to me, was that, who's going to go out with you? You've got so much baggage. Now, I actually don't have any baggage. I have 3 amazing children. But people say that to single mothers all of the time.
Yes, true.
Who would want you? You've got 3 kids. Who would want you? Look at your body now. Because, of course, after we've had children, very few of us ping back to the pre baby body. I certainly didn't. My boobs got enormous.
Mhm.
I used to be normal. Now suddenly I've had babies and my boobs are huge. It's not a bad thing. It is what it
Mm.
is.
Yeah.
But people will say, who's going to have you now that you're flabby, now that you're fatter? And it's nonsense because your body is carrying your spirit and it should be looked after because it's carrying who you are. They say things to completely suck away your self esteem. And you've got this playing in the back of your mind all of the time. Well, who's going to want me? I've got 3 kids. Who's going to want me? I've got fat. Who's going to want me? I don't have a really good job. Putting you down constantly, telling you this person, they prefer that kind of look rather than what you are, but you're lucky to have them.
Mm.
And that chips away at your self esteem. And like I say, women say, why was I so stupid? How could I be so stupid? Nobody teaches us the things to look for at the beginning. Well, actually, that's not true. I will teach you the things to look for at the beginning of a relationship. And if you read my book, you'll learn the things to look for at the beginning of a relationship. You're going to chip away at your self worth. But we don't talk about that in the home. And the reason we don't talk about that in the home is because our parents don't know it either.
Truth.
We don't talk about these things because although we tend to say things like, you must be truthful, when it actually comes to the crunch,
Mm.
we're not really truthful, are we? We tend to let people get away with doing the things that they do and saying the things that they say in order to keep peace. But it's not really keeping the peace. It might be keeping their peace and it might be keeping peace in the family that you're in, but you're the one carrying the war inside of you. You're the person who's got the
Mm.
turmoil inside of you. And if you're taught to keep the peace, you've got to carry that trauma. And trauma will manifest itself in physical illness. I know so many women who are physically ill. They've got fibromyalgia, they've got ME, they've got arthritis, and all sorts because they have held the responsibility of the trauma of their abuse inside of them.
So it's more like this mental and emotional traumas that these abusive partners cause them physical symptoms.
I think so. I think that's what's happened. And I know a lot of people think, well, I'm not in an abusive relationship because there's no physical abuse, there's no hitting, but emotional abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse. I mean, financial abuse is huge.
Yes.
And if you're worried, you're being emotionally abused and you're confused, you think, what on earth did I do to be in this situation? And it actually manifests itself physically. So for me, all domestic abuse in some form becomes physical abuse, even if you're not being hit.
Yeah.
It continues, doesn't it? Like financial abuse through the relationship and also afterwards. You hear this all the time where people have children
Mm.
and the non-abusive parent manages to survive that, and usually it's a woman who ends up with the children, and then the abusive parent doesn't financially support their children, so you've got ongoing abuse post separation. Now separation, if you're in an abusive relationship, and I have to say this, Camille, because it's really really serious, if you manage to escape your abuser, your risk of harm and murder increases significantly because that is when murders happen post separation. And that's one of the reasons why women particularly stay in abusive relationships, because they know that the abuse will get worse and significantly dangerous if they leave.
Yeah, because they will be threatened all the time.
Yes. And if you are living with your abuser, at least you know where they are most of the time. Whereas if you leave, you don't know what's around the corner.
It's very sad.
It's terrifying.
So, Miss Ray,
Yeah.
how can a person heal from these traumas? Because I know someone, she's still in the fresh phase of the abusive relationship. So,
Mm.
yeah, I was really wondering how these people can heal.
Okay. What I would say is you need to kind of regulate your emotions because you become dysregulated when you're in an abusive relationship and you stop trusting yourself. And you can go to therapy, I suppose, and get some counseling. But for me, it's really important to surround yourself with positive people who are supportive. And if you've come from a relationship where you've been isolated from your friends and family, you need to start working on building those relationships back up again because your abuser has kept you away from people. I have a course actually, it's called Finding Your Voice in Relationships, which is online. And that's about learning how to trust your gut again, like your gut feeling. For me, I think gut feeling is really important. But if you've been so abused, you can sometimes think, well, I can't trust my gut because I got involved with this person.
Yes.
I ignored the red flags at the beginning. And it's fine. Like you look back and you think, well, yes, that was a red flag, but I pushed it down and I didn't want it to be a red flag. So I pretended that that hadn't happened. And the truth is really important. The truth is a very difficult way to live. Being
Mm.
honest is a very difficult way to live. But for me, I think it's the only way because it protects you. You have to be honest with yourself and you have to be honest with the people who are around you and get to the situation where you again can trust your own, your inner voice that says, this isn't quite right.
Yeah, I think this is one of the beauty if you join the WOW gathering or even just in the Facebook chat.
Yeah, come into the WOW Facebook group. It's great. You can follow us on Instagram as well. We've got a few. I've
Yes.
only set that up, but the WOW group on Facebook is
Yeah.
closed, so nobody can find it unless I send them the link. And then we do make sure that the people in there are all women.
Yeah, exactly. So, Miss Ray, let's talk about Be Kind, No Excuses. Can you tell us more about it?
Be Kind No Excuses happened when we first went into the pandemic. I always had a book in the back of my mind because I always thought that you can see red flag behaviours. Now, I was a police officer for 27 years. My specialism was domestic violence and safeguarding. And I spoke to a lot of women who were victims of abuse. And I spoke to a lot of men who were perpetrators of abuse. And I always recognised a pattern in the behaviour. So I thought, why don't we talk about seeing the pattern at the beginning of a relationship before we become too involved with that person, before we've emotionally committed to that person? So, when you just start dating somebody and you think, and I know when you start dating somebody, you think, oh, this is going to be a relationship. You're always full of hope and you really
Yes.
want a relationship, but you have to be honest with yourself, which is part of what the Find Your Voice course is about. It's about being honest with yourself and how you approach your relationships and how you progress your relationships. But the Be Kind No Excuses came because I thought I should write a book about preventing domestic abuse. And I told the world that that was going to happen. And ladies came to me and said, could you tell my story? Because what I wanted to do is I wanted to tell stories because I know that stories are easier to remember than statistics. And bearing in mind
True.
that I'm writing this book for teenagers, I don't want to bombard them with figures and 9% of this and 97% of that and some statistics in the book. But I wanted to tell stories so that they would remember, and then maybe when something happens to them, they can identify and remember the lady in the book and think, oh, I remember that. This is that. So ladies came to me with their stories, and I just said, write your story from the beginning, like from the moment that you met your abuser to be. And they did. And I've gone through each story. And I mean, of the 5 stories in the book, 4 of those ladies were teenagers when they met their abuser to be. Oh, I mean, statistically, I'm
Right.
like spouting off statistics, which I didn't want to do, but teenagers, the biggest
Mm.
group of abusive relationships is between the ages of 14 and 24, which is horrific. So I annotated the stories. This behavior, what he said, what he did, what happened, this is a red flag, and this is a red flag because it's stalking or it's isolation or it's undermining your confidence or whatever it is. And if you read the book, you can see, you read the stories and it's got the explanations underneath on each page to say this behavior. So when you're in a relationship and they do something, like for example, they want to know where you are all the time. Now think about this. You have apps on your phone. I mean, I have got an app on my phone, and my husband has the app and my youngest child has the app now. My youngest son is an adult, technically, he's 19, but he's still at school. And he's happy for me to know where he is. It's a
Mm.
location app, and which is fine because sometimes I have to go and get him in the middle of the night. I
Yes,
have to
yes.
know where he is.
Yes, that's true.
But
Yes.
if you're a teenager,
Mm.
the only person who needs to know where you are is your mum or your dad. You don't need your boyfriend or girlfriend
Yes.
to know where you are. Now, I know there's Snapchat, which is an app, and you have to switch off your location. It's automatically switched on when you download the app. So if people connect with you, they know where you actually are, which is very dangerous.
Yes, and many teenagers use it.
Yeah, all of them. But if your new boyfriend or girlfriend wants to know where you are all of the time, that's really creepy. And it's not about keeping you safe because that's what your parents' job is. If they say, well, I like to know where you are so I know that you're safe, you like to know where I am so you know where I am, where I said it would be because you don't trust me. You don't think that I'm out with my girlfriends.
Mm.
So you'll turn up and make sure that I am who I said I would be with.
Like a paranoid behavior.
Yeah, stalking. Or, take a photograph of where you are. There's a thing like on social media, it's like, take a photograph of where you are right now. And I'm like, absolutely not. Don't do that.
There are
Yeah.
more abuses. The most shocking abuses are when in social media you all look happy,
Yeah.
especially if you are already married, but then internally you are actually abused financially, you are abused physically, or your confidence is being damaged all the time.
Yeah. It's really scary when people say, what goes on behind closed doors. And I know people on social media who put things up, and I just think, well, that's not actually your reality because I know you're struggling. But social media is a
Yeah, it's
beast, isn't it?
just like a part of your life that you just want to
Mm.
show. And that's the only sad thing when things look happy, but internally they're already struggling so
Yeah.
much.
You're not going to put stuff on social media that's horrible unless your social media account is about abusive relationships. There's a lot of accounts on Instagram are about after somebody's survived an abusive relationship and then they're sharing their experience to help and support other people who are going through the same thing, which is great. But what really I don't like is when they're, oh, lovely, happy family pictures. And you know for a fact that
Yeah.
she's living in fear constantly and never has any money because he's controlling the bank account and he checks how much shopping, how much money she spent on food and checks the car to see how far she's
Oh
driven,
my God.
checks the mileage in the car.
That's
And
very horrible.
where have you been today? Well, nowhere. Well, why is there another 4 miles on the car then?
Very terrifying and very controlling.
Very control. Yeah. The whole thing is about control, isn't it? Power and control. And if at the very beginning they display behaviors that are controlling, they can look like they're caring. For an example, I'll use this. You're a teenage girl, so you're 15, you go to the cinema with your friends, you come out of the cinema, and your new boyfriend is there. And you say, "What are you doing here?" And he says,
That's
"I've come
true.
to walk you home to keep you safe." Now, one, who is he keeping you safe from? You're with your girlfriends. You'll already have arranged how to get home. Um, and really, essentially, he's keeping you safe from people like him, really, because he's the risk, he's the danger. And the second thing is, he's really just there to make sure that you are with who you said you
Mm.
were going to be with. Because you've got to remember that abusers will often accuse you of the things that they are doing. Like narcissistic abusers are serial cheaters. They will have relationships, multiple relationships.
Actually, this kind of personality, sometimes there are also parents who are like that. That's why these teenage girls or maybe even sons think that this is the normal thing because their parents also do the same thing like every second.
And that's true. Yeah, absolutely true. So you might come from a family where
Mm.
there is trauma and drama all of the time, and that's normal to you. That's your comfort zone. And then you start a relationship with somebody who's got a family who's very caring, very supportive, very nurturing, and no drama. But your comfort zone is drama. So in that relationship, you create drama because you think that's what about. But actually, what you're doing is you're traumatizing that other person whose comfort zone is no drama, and it's about understanding the dynamic of that, understanding the effect that you have on people because somebody needs that drama for them to feel safe, whereas the other person needs the calm. That's not
Never.
going to work. That's not going to work. No. As you get older and you start being more independent as a child, you go out and you go to friends' houses, and then
Yes.
you realize that not all families are like yours. People are different, and
Mm.
what your family quirks are, somebody else has got different quirk and behaviors. And then you realize eventually that what happened in your family is not okay. That behavior is abusive. And then parents who are stuck in the cycle as well. And you have to
Yeah.
break the cycle.
Exactly. That's why it's important that
Yeah.
we are spreading awareness early on so that we won't be repeating negative cycles all throughout.
Yes, exactly. It's difficult if you're a child, if you have abusive parents, parents who are abusive to each other are abusive to their children. Because for me, domestic abuse is child abuse. Because if you
Yes.
have a mother who's been abused by the father, affects the children, and the other way around, it's psychological damage to the
True.
children. So it's about being aware of that and recognizing that it's not you. It's not, it's
Yes.
not your fault. It's not anything that you've done. It is solely the fault and the responsibility of the person who's perpetrating the
Yes, and I
abuse.
think it's very important to this kind of issues, this kind of topics are very important for also self-healing, especially if you have been through all this trauma. How can you go forward and, just heal and just become a different person because sometimes you lose your confidence. You don't know if you'll become well again and all that. So, yeah, thank you for your programs. I've read about ABC, and now you said about
Yeah,
finding your voice. So these are timely
yeah,
because now relationships are getting younger. The children now have become more liberated and toxic. And then even the stories in the movies and in the books, it's like they're romanizing something that is
yes.
toxic. So it's like a dangerous place for very young children. And there'll be series of toxicity.
I think it's quite frightening that the biggest statistic of abused people is the teenagers. And 20% of teenagers have been in abusive relationships already.
Yes, thank you, Miss Raymond. It's really a lovely time, and I will surely read your book.
Camille, thank you so much for having me on as a guest. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I hope you learned something valuable today and continue to support VeggieFit. Because here at VeggieFit, we may not still be fit and still far from being spiritual, but we're working on it every day. Thank you for listening and see you again in our next podcast.